Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal. I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm all right, all things considered.
Yeah.
Cold out there. A little cold for doing our summer prospects list, eh?
Yeah. First Canadian vaccinated today, Bruce, right?
Outstanding.
Big day, big day.
Mm-hmm.
And may there be many, many, many more very quickly.
That's got to be considered a turning point for sure. I mean, it's going to take a long time to turn this big boat around, but you got to start somewhere, and that's a start.
Yeah, what do you figure once we get to about, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 million Canadians vaccinated, we start to turn that's when the really vulnerable people, all of them should be covered by then. And then that's a big relief for everybody. So,
I'll be happier when we don't have to worry so much about losing a big swath of the healthcare workers, because that could really compound a very difficult situation already, right?
That'll be earlier on.
Yeah, that's a high priority, and it should be.
That'll be fairly quick, I hope. All right, so that's the good news, and it's very good news. We're going to talk about, we re-ranked the Cult of Hockey prospects.
Mm-hmm.
And we did so because the first time around we did it when there was nothing to talk about. So we decided to rank them then in May between the first. Is interregnum the right word, Bruce? What does interregnum mean?
Between reigns, so it's after the king has died and before the next king or queen has been crowned.
So maybe not the right word.
You have this little gap. Yeah, no, it was more.
A pause.
The first you call it.
The first pause between the first pause season. Yeah, the first off season we ranked them, but we didn't have all of the players who had drafted this year. So we decided to re-rank them. And there was an added bonus because in the pause, the second pause, we were able to actually watch. So for the first time, we've actually watched almost every player, or many, many of the players on the list, far more of the players on the list than we've ever seen before. So we actually, I think our list is hopefully it's better than previous lists, and it certainly has more firsthand knowledge from many of us, myself, yourself, and Sean Patrick Ryan. We're all watching the Oil Knight. Sean Patrick Ryan. We're all watching these players. I'd also like to thank Kurt Levins, of course, who voted, and the Journal's Hall of Famer Jim Matheson, who kindly again participated in the voting. So thanks, Jim, and thanks Kurt and Sean Patrick Ryan. You guys, we really appreciate you participating in the ranking. And I think the more kind of expert people weighing in, the better, like the better the ranking you're going to get. So, Bruce, let's start at the top of the list. We're going to talk about probably about the top 15 players or so. And we're going to talk about who's rising and who's falling and how long some of these guys have been on the list. And we're going to end up with, where does this draft list compare to other draft lists in previous years? Because there's some suggestion that this is a pretty good darn list and maybe the best list of Oiler prospects in 40 years. So we'll have a look at that. Who's number one, Bruce?
Well, number one is and remains right shot defenseman Evan Bouchard. Oilers' first-round pick, number 10 overall in 2018, and he immediately soared to number one in the rankings that year. And he has stayed there in 2019, during our interim rankings in 2020, and still just by a hair, ranking number one on our list. He's the first guy to ever even make number one 2 years in a row, let alone 3. So he actually is being slow played. I mean, a big problem with our list in the past. It's not that it's lacked quality, but it's lacked durability. I mean, you bring in a hot shot, he's number one for 10 minutes, and then he's in the NHL, because that's been the Oilers' way for since Sam Gagner was
since the early days,
fresh-faced teenager. Well, yeah, I suppose.
I mean, Coffey, Messier, all those guys were on the list 1 year in the NHL. That's been the Oilers' way right from the start. If we're completely honest about it, and it's especially with the top picks, they move in and they're not on the list. Ryan Smith was on the list 2 years. So yeah, and Jason Arnott 1 year and 1 year drafted in the NHL. So this is the way of the Oilers, and the closest to Bouchard would be Nurse, because Darnell Nurse was on the list.
Nurse and Clefbaum, like
3 years. Nurse was number 2 on the list, right?
right.
So that's a very strong comparable for Bouchard, like someone, a really, really promising guy who's been high on the list for a number of years in a row.
And Clefbaum was in the top 3 years in a row. So the Oilers have a little bit more. They waited for defensemen until they were 20. It's been the forwards they pushed into the NHL at age 18, and the defensemen. So it's not like Bouchard is behind schedule or anything. It's just they're actually maturing the guy into a hockey player before pushing him in the NHL, which is, of course, as it should be.
Yamamoto was also on the list, I think, 3 years? Of course, he was always dipping his toe in the NHL each of those years. And he moved down the list, interestingly, the longer he was on the list, because he kind of we started to question him a little bit. Is the truth, if we're completely honest, compared to other prospects like Bouchard and...
I think he went number 1, number 2, number 4. And the third year, we actually had to break our own rule, which is eligible for the Calder Trophy, which technically he wasn't eligible for the Calder Trophy last year because he had played 6+ games in 2 different seasons, an archaic rule which disqualifies some actually deserving players from even being eligible for the Calder Trophy. It's a flaw in the system that I wrote about almost 10 years ago when Alex Pietrangelo got screwed out of being considered for the Calder Trophy, but they've never gotten around to fixing it. So in his case, we sort of made the executive decision, well, he's definitely still a prospect. He may have played 2 seasons of slightly over 6 games, but he's definitely still in the system, so we considered him as such. So
we use it as a guideline rather than as a rule. So Bouchard and Brolberg were very close this year, and I think both Jim Matheson and I, in the end, voted Brolberg for number 1, and then yourself, Kurt, and Sean all voted for Bouchard as number 1. And I think it was very close for everybody, right?
It was actually yourself and Sean who voted for Brolberg.
Are you sure that it wasn't Patty?
Yep. Yeah, it's right. And I'm looking right at the rankings by voter here. And Jim, Kurt, and myself all voted for Bouchard. And all of us had the same top 2. So it was razor thin.
Bruce, I think you made a little mistake, if I'm going to be, I don't want to call you out here. But I think it was Sean who has Brolberg. I'll just check the original voting list here. I think it's Sean who has Bouchard and Jim has Brolberg. Yeah. Maddie has Brolberg, number 1. Okay. And Sean has Bouchard, number 1. Is that what you have? Anyway. On the original list, Maddie's got Brolberg.
Oh my goodness. 1. Yeah, okay.
Don't worry.
No, I've located I've got the wrong names on the wrong columns. I'm going to have to fix my post. So thank you for that.
All right.
I don't think Sean will be pleased when he sees Kirill Maximov listed as his number 25 prospect on his list.
Oh, you have Maddie's list.
Yeah, that's my checkpoint. I went, whoa, I got him backwards. I don't know how that happened.
Oh, you panicked a little bit.
Sorry, guys. I'll fix that.
Stop the podcast. Okay, we'll fix that within an hour.
By the time you're reading this podcast, this will not be an issue. And listening to this podcast, it will have already been resolved.
I hate making a list and then looking at it online.
No, of course. No, I'm embarrassed.
Too many times. The great thing about the internet, Bruce, is you can fix it. Like you can correct it. There you go.
That's true. It's not like it's published in a book and you can't even open the book for the rest of your life because it's got one mistake in it that you just can't live with.
Yeah. So I'll tell you why I had Brolberg slightly ahead of Bouchard. Here's just real quick. It's just it's so close. But I just think when I think of their long-term NHL career, there's something about Brolberg's size and his skating. I just think this guy could be an NHL player a long, long time. And I'm not saying Bouchard can't be either, but I just really, and I guess I just have a little bit of question in the end about Bouchard's defensive play still. You could say the same thing about Brolberg's offensive play. But I'm liking Brolberg's offensive play enough to think just with his defensive play alone, which I think is coming along, like his one-on-one defending and all that stuff is coming along well enough that I just see a longer NHL career in the end. And I'm just a little bit, Bouchard's still got to answer that one question about his defensive play at the NHL level. So that's why.
Yeah, well, I wish I'd shared your confidence in Broberry's defensive play. I mean, he has lots of good moments, but he does have clangers and soft coverage issues at time, and they wind up in the net. So
Yeah.
I mean, they both have a ways to go. And of course, the tough thing with comparing these two guys right now, even though we're both watching them both playing in Sweden, is that they're in two very different leagues. Broberg's playing in the toughest league of all, the Swedish Hockey League, well, toughest league in Sweden. And Bouchard is one level down in the Hockey Allsvenskan. And that's roughly the equivalent of comparing a guy playing in the NHL to a guy playing in the AHL. So it's hard to compare. I mean, Bouchard's got better stats and he's superficially got a better season, but he's playing against weaker opponents. And with weaker teammates, to be fair, but you would expect him to stand out, and he has.
Yeah, fair enough, Bruce. Number 3 on our list is Dylan Holloway, and we saw him in a couple college games this year, and he looked really fast and really, he looks big and strong and hustles, and he's made Team Canada, Bruce. Interestingly, ahead of Seth Jarvis, who every Oiler fan was kind of, or not every Oiler, many of us draftniks were kind of Seth Jarvis on draft day, right? And then the pick before the Oilers, I think it was Carolina who took Seth Jarvis, and we're sitting there thinking, and they take Dylan Holloway, and I think it was just a common reaction again from the draftniks that everyone was a little bit let down. But Holloway, interestingly, on a, and it's kind of interesting how this happened, because when you look at the Oilers and who's going to be making the Oilers in years to come, they're going to be looking for some third line or some role players. And Holloway, I think, has made Team Canada because he's a bit of a role player. He's not the top power play guy, because there's no room on the top power play, and there ain't no room on the top Oilers power play for a while either, I'm going to say. So in terms of like a fit for the Oilers, a big, fast, aggressive power forward type who can fit in a lot of roles might find a spot on the Oilers a bit easier than a power play guy like Seth Jarvis. So that's just one thought. I mean, I would have been happy if the Oilers drafted Seth Jarvis still, but Holloway's looking good.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's made Team Canada as a left winger, even as he plays center in University of Wisconsin. And of course, Team Canada, traditionally, they've often piled up 6 or 7 or 8 centers and moved some to the wings. But the fact that Holloway has previous experience playing the wings makes that an easy transition for him. But, and it means that he's coming in a versatile player that can do multiple things. And he's, I think, being cast on the penalty kill unit, which, of course, will be a place where he can help the Oilers in years to come. The thing that impressed me most about this player watching him was his aggressiveness on the puck. He would just take a beeline to the puck, and it wouldn't matter if it was the offensive zone, neutral zone, defensive zone. I mean, he wouldn't go out of his own territory, but he would go hard on the puck to and through the puck carrier on the other team. He wouldn't just go for the puck; he'd go for the man and the puck. And that just seemed to be part of his DNA, man. He was all over that thing, and he was a real thorn in the side of the other team. I just love to see that.
It's interesting because Sean Patrick Ryan talks about what he's looking for in a player is this NHL translatable skill. Something that this player has that is good enough that's going to make an impact at the NHL level. And I think that's a pretty strong way to look at these prospects, because when I started to look at them, That's what I started to see. And it's why I rated some players a bit higher than other people, I think, because I started to see in players like Lavoie, Kessel, Ring, and Landstrom, what I saw as, yeah, he could step into the Oilers lineup and bring that.
Right.
And Holloway is a good example of that. And the example you brought up is an excellent example of that. Because again, yeah, that's it, right? Like you could just see him getting in there on the forecheck and getting on a guy and turning over the puck and passing it to Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, right? Like that's what pops into your head all of a sudden, possibly with Holloway. And so Maddie actually was the only person of the list who had him as in fourth place. He had Dmitry Samorukov in third place, which is interesting. So, and Maddie's basing that on the fact that Samorukov stepped up in the KHL and is essentially playing top four, top two, top pairing even on his team in the KHL and is getting the job done very well. So I can see Maddie's thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Right. With Samorukov, we've all been impressed with the human metronome. He is coming on strong in the KHL. Good for Samorukov. Number 4 on our list. Number 5, if you have any, you can. Number 5, we just want to go to Lavoie.
Yep.
So I had him the highest, Bruce. I had him at number 4. You had him at number 5, and Sean had him the lowest, number 7. So why I had him higher, just that NHL translatable skill. I saw a guy who got the puck and just buried his way to the net, just powered his way to the net. And was that ever a wonderful thing to see? Because it's a pretty rare quality, honestly. Like guys who just get it and will just have that fire in their eyes to go for the net and take it there. That was, again, I thought, okay, you get on a top line in the NHL and you do that, you might have a little bit of a future there. So with his size and his shot, combined with his size and his shot, that's why I had him a little higher. What do you think of the player?
Yeah, much the same. I mean, he is a big man, and he's he's not the most gifted skater, but what I saw that I liked was that he always was moving his feet in the games that I saw. He wasn't sort of gliding around 2-footed. He was driving, and he knew where he was going. He had a reason to go there. He was his head was in the game. And, the criticism of this guy is that he's a little erratic. And of course, you have to watch 100 games before you know the degree that might be. But in the games that I saw, which is a number of games, I was satisfied with his level of play. And he was he's on a weak team in Hockey Allsvenskan, which kind of makes him stand out, but it also makes his job a lot tougher. It's not like he had gifted teammates feeding him the puck all the time. He was. He was doing a lot of the heavy lifting himself.
Yeah, when I look at the list of the top 15, there's, I think, about 4 guys who are quite physical or more physical. There's Lavoie, Lagesson, Kesselring, and Maximov. And I think Lavoie is the chippiest. He just strikes me as kind of a bit of a nasty player. I saw a few instances of that. And I like that, Bruce. I really like that a lot. So what can I say? That helps.
It's been part of the game for as long as I've been watching it.
Yeah. Tyler Benson slipped. He was number 3 on our list as recently as June. And, it's interesting because he's not playing poorly. He's playing in the second Swiss league and he's putting up a point a game. He's playing well, but I just think, there's one guy who's drafted and moved ahead of him, which isn't surprising. But and then there's Lavoie and Samorukov who have been really playing very, very well in Europe, I think. So that's why Benson, I mean, he's still, the shine's off him a little bit though, Bruce. I guess his real window was this past year. And it's interesting because when he came to Edmonton, I actually thought he looked pretty good. He fit right in on a third line. I could see him. Tyler Benson's interesting because I think he could play up and down the lineup and might make the Oilers as a fourth liner because he's solid defensively. He checks. He doesn't give away the puck. So he's an interesting player, but he has slid because I just think that top line potential seems to be fading with him a little bit.
He's still the top left winger on our list, but he's gone down the depth chart a little bit, but in terms of on at his position, we have him listed as the top candidate to earn a left wing job in the NHL. That said, listing Dylan Holloway as a center and knowing that he may well wind up as a left wing, but that's years off. Also, Carter Savoie, we'll get to in a minute, is years off. Tyler Benson is now or within the next 12 months. That is his time. So he's got to step up. But if he does, he'll get his chance, I think.
Maddie had him at 5, and
Mhm.
Sean had him at 9. So that was the kind of the variance
Right.
there. Ryan Macleod, the highest rating he had, we have him at 7th overall. The highest rating was Sean had him at 5, and I had him at 10.
Right.
And I guess, and this is after I've been kind of liked a lot of what I've seen in Switzerland. Like there's things to like about Ryan Macleod. He's so
Yep.
fast. He's big. He can make a play with the puck.
Hmm.
Although I don't think he has got top 6. When he gets the puck, he holds it. He needs to hold it quite a bit before he makes the play. Like in terms of
Hmm.
getting the puck and making the instant great play with it, having that head up and just quickly seeing something and making something fast. That's not the give and go. Isn't his game. He's more of a Pitlick type of player who gets the puck and fires up the wing and then can get a shot at net, as opposed to someone who quickly combines easily at an elite level. And I guess the reason that I don't have him as high this time around is I just have some questions about his defensive fundamentals and his defensive intensity. And I think he's going to be in the NHL as a checker, and I want to see him totally excel in that role at a lower level before I'm convinced that he's an NHLer. And I'm just still on the fence about that.
Right. Yeah. He also has the versatility to play center or wing.
Yeah.
And he's a second round draft choice. And, to me that, um, you mentioned Pitlick already. And to me, the other sort of, comparable at the lower end, from that same 2010 draft was a guy named Curtis Hamilton, who was
Yeah.
a big, um, sort of superficially, um, talented, looked good, left winger that played with Saskatoon Blades, and he was promising, but some of the exact same, um, criticisms were noted of that guy in terms of being a little bit of a peripheral player, and that's going to be McLeod's big issue is getting himself in the middle of things as opposed to on the outside reaching in, right? And I would say that was a criticism on his draft day, and he to this point has not made it go away. So that is not necessarily a good sign. He's big, he's fast, he's reasonably skilled. I had him as number 6 on my list, and I think there's a good chance he'll be an NHLer, but whether he'll be an impact NHLer is an entirely different question.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that kind of compete level. I like people hate that word. They had a grit intensity in his game. Another word that people hate. Those grit compete. That's what I'm not. That where I see it in Lavoie, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not seeing it as much with this player.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to that for me. Um, oh, about Pitlick, he took
Mm-hmm.
6 years from the year
Yeah.
from the year that he was drafted to the year he finally made it full time as an NHLer. It took 6 years. So we've had other Oilers wingers and forwards take that long. Sean Van Allen,
Mm-hmm.
um, Chris Vandevelde. So there's these guys who sometimes it takes a while, but they're in the NHL for a long time. And Tyler Pitlick may be in the NHL for a while, so he's hanging in there so far. So McLeod may take a while, may take 5-6 years in the minors, but he could still make it. Um,
Yeah, those guys all took a second opinion too before they really made it. Vandevelde
yeah,
was in Philly, Pitlick was in Dallas when he made it as a full-time player. Sean Van Allen was an expansion draft player in Anaheim, Mighty
yes,
Ducks of Anaheim, and then he became a long-time sort of useful bottom six NHLer for a bunch of fairly terrible teams. But uh, he had an extraordinarily long career for a guy who took as long as he did to ever make it.
Number 8 on our list is Carter Savoy, who is so Kurt and I had him as high as number 6.
Mm-hmm.
So we're believing what we see in the hot streak. We've put a lot of faith in that, obviously. And obviously other people are putting weight in that as well, or he wouldn't be this high as he is. Number 8 on our list. Sean, the lowest ranking was Sean, who had him at 12th. What do you think of him, Bruce? You had him at 8th, just where he ended up. What's your take?
Yeah, well, on draft day, I thought, just on draft pedigree, Holloway would probably slide in, at number 3. And that guys like Savoy, Tulio, they might be at 15 or 18 or something, just based on where they got picked. Like, we just list them in order of their draft number, they would be down the list. But Savoy obviously has made a very quick and positive impression. And when you build that on top of what he did last year, in his last year of junior hockey, what they used to call Tier 2 junior hockey, prep level for NCAA, where he scored 53 times in 54 games. And he's quickly proving in NC2A that was no fluke, that he's a sniper and a goal scorer, and he's shown it. And we've watched the games that he's played, and it's, not just that he's sort of cashing out of nowhere. It's he's gotten stronger game by game, and he's he's making things happen out there. And this is as a raw freshman. And man, you hear the announcers talking about the guy, and of course, I mean, hyping the team is part of what they're about. But they're clearly extremely impressed with what he's been able to do as an 18-year-old freshman, and it's a very, very promising start for a guy that clearly has a lot of skills. And you want to talk about a translatable NHL skill, that shot, that release, and the ability to disguise the shot and to use the screens to let the play develop, to change his shooting angles. Like, he's got the smarts of a goal scorer, and he's got the numbers of a goal scorer. So that's a pretty nice translatable skill to have.
Yeah, that ability to change the shot. There's one other player on the Oilers that has that in this list, and that's Evan Bouchard, right? Like, be able to change the angle of the shot, get it off on net. And it's funny because when I was watching Carter Sawyer, it kind of popped in my head. He's Evan Bouchard on defense. Like, he's this incredibly skilled, smart player with the puck who makes invariably the right play with the puck, but maybe has a few questions about his skating and his defensive intensity. And, that's pretty high praise for Savoy to compare him to Bouchard. But that's a pretty strong start. And we'll see if he can keep it up or not. But the reason I have him as high as I do is I think the scouts questioned his intensity and his defensive play, his work ethic in the AJHL. That's why he dropped to where he dropped in the draft. Right. I'm seeing that question answered in the games that I'm seeing a player who hustles as much as anyone. And as far as his skating goes, I'm seeing him go around players. I'm seeing him get the puck in his own zone and skate it up ice and go wide on a D-man and take him on and get around him now and then. So
or hit the gap with speed and just flash right through and get a shot away.
The thing that impresses me, Bruce, is that ability, as soon as he gets the puck, whether it's a shot or a pass, to control it and make a play and make the right play. Like, that is such magic on the ice when I see a player able to do that. Like, the puck's bouncing up the boards and he gets it off, kicks it off his skate to a stick and makes that pass instantly, or he goes forehand, gets it up backhand, goes forehand and makes the pass instantly. And it's because his eyes are up all the time. Carter Savoy is a heads-up hockey player. That's his offensive genius, and he's looking around. And again, we're looking for players down the road who can play with McDavid, who don't need to carry the puck, but when they get the puck, they make the right play. They can fire that puck on net or make that great quick pass, but they're not necessarily looking to go through the entire other team with the puck, like Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins, or on a very lower end, Ryan Macleod, like people who like to have the puck on their stick. So who knows? Maybe one day there'll be a fit there if he keeps working at it, keeps progressing, and obviously keeps up this level of scoring, which would be fairly dramatic. and unlikely. Carter Savoie has a shot at that, so that's why I have him at number 6.
He's at least 2 years away.
Yeah, I think I could see Holloway playing just one more year of college and then coming out this summer. That would be likely, I would say. I would
Very
say
possible.
Savoie, listen, if he keeps up this level of scoring, Bruce, he could come out after this, if that happens, for instance. He could come out after 1 year, but he would be wise to think about building up his strength, his skating speed and all of that, and take a couple years in the NCAA, at least, maybe 3. Number 9 on our list, William Lagesson, Bruce. You had him. You had him right at number 9. What do you think of the player?
Well, he's just there, right? And I mean, last year I think we had him at number 7, and this spring we had him at number 8. Now we got him at number 9, and what's happened really is Holloway and Savoie have come into the list and gone ahead of him. That's one way to interpret it, but he remains in the conversation. But I think the thing with him is the ceiling is fairly low. It's taken a long time to get to this point, and you look at him and you say, well, where is the NHL translatable plus skill? Like he has NHL skills, but what is it that will be his standout skill? That'll be the reason that he makes it in the NHL, and it doesn't just jump off the page at you. He does a lot of good little things, and there there's lots to like about the overall package, but there's no real one thing that sort of jumps out at you. So
that's a really strong take, Bruce. I agree, because the thing you might say, well, his aggressiveness, but you got to be able to catch the players to hit them, and I'm not sure if Lagesson's going to be able to do that necessarily at the NHL level. He struggled a little bit in the games we saw defensively now and then. So yeah, that's why there's some question marks around the player. Like, what exactly is he going to bring at the NHL level? He's kind of good at everything, but that can often speak at the AHL level and the Allsvenskan level, kind of really good at everything. But how's that going to play out? Number 10, Olivier Rodrigue. I didn't know. It's kind of hard to rate the goalie. He's obviously doing well in the Austrian league. He seems like, just based on the fact that Skinner has struggled, he struggled quite a bit at the AHL level last year. And Konovalov has struggled a little bit at the KHL level. He's lost his starting job to, what's that goal? That goal he used to be at the Oilers, like a backup.
Oh. I know his name.
Field.
Yeah. He was a career minor leaguer, and all of a sudden now he's the number 1 guy with a ridiculous save percentage. Anyway.
So Rodrigue's kind of the top Oilers prospect. Bruce, when I was looking at our list and thinking of the top prospects, I was thinking, I can see the Oilers using a second, if they have a second draft pick. Eddie Pasquale. I can see the Oilers using a second-round draft pick, maybe even a first-round draft pick one of these years on a goalie. When you look at their list, it's the one obvious area, unless Rodrigue comes over and lights it up in the AHL, or that's one area where I think they could use a bit more quality.
Yeah, we talked about, in serious terms about the Oilers drafting Askarov if he was available. Yaroslav Askarov, who went 11th overall in the draft. So, of course, he didn't get down to the Oilers. But there was talk that if he did, that they might take a shot at, home run swing at one of these super hot shot young goaltenders. And, it worked for Tampa Bay, right? But it's possible in the future. I do think that both Rodrigue and Konovalov are interesting prospects, a little bit on the small side, but Rodrigue's pedigree is a little bit stronger than either Dylan Wells or Stuart Skinner, that the Oilers draft choices who preceded him, and he had a very good last year of junior, and we'll see where he takes it in the pro ranks. Normally, you would think he'll land this year in the ECHL, but that's all up in the air, as you know.
Did Askarov get hurt this year? Because I'm looking at He's only played 3 games. Let me just see, or maybe I'm missing something here.
That team had a COVID issue, and I'm not sure that it didn't concern him directly.
My mistake. I was just looking at his international games. He played 7 games. He's played 7 games for St. Petersburg and 2 games in the VHL, so he's not been hurt. And he did 962 save percentage. I think he might
have had to sit out for COVID for a bit. I know his team did, and I'm not sure it didn't affect him personally, but that's an old memory of a player from some other team, so I don't necessarily store it the same way.
Not top of mind. Number 11 is a very interesting player. I had him ranked the highest. He's Michael Kesselring. I'm going to be writing about him. Actually, I'm going to watch his game from the weekend. I haven't watched it yet.
Okay. All right.
He and Kemp had debut games. Kemp in the Allsvenskan, and Kesselring is now playing in the whatever American College Hockey East, I think maybe, for Northeastern. So I had him at number 8. Sean had him as low. Sean, he's also watched him play, had him at 13. So I just really he could be like a Lagesson. Like, there might not be some obvious thing that will make him an NHL player. He's very Lagesson-like, right? Like he's big. He's bigger than Lagesson. He's rugged. He's pretty good moving the puck. He's pretty solid defensively, but is that really standout still going to be there? I guess if there was a standout skill, it's his size. Like he's about 2 or 3 inches taller than Lagesson already. And so that's something. So, but nonetheless, Bruce, this is a player who has really stepped up since his draft year, and I think is kind of comparing someone to William Lagesson isn't bad, because Lagesson has a chance at an NHL career here, and so does Kesselring. So that's why that's what I'm seeing in the player. What about you?
Lots to like in this player. I watched him play, and he really impressed me at the two development camps that he came to, which is one piece of information we are missing this year. You talk about seeing all these game tapes, but we did not get the opportunity to see these guys play in game situations at all. He's a pretty interesting case. I mean, his size is the one thing that dominates. He stands out there, and he makes me wonder, well, what did Colton Parayko look like as a 20-year-old breaking into U.S. college hockey, right? I mean, he came out of nowhere in terms of a low draft pick. Nobody really thought much of the guy, and then he grew up to be 6'6" and a fairly. No, I'm not saying he's that guy. I'm just comparing the potential career curves of where they're going with it, and Parayko took him 3 years at University of Alaska Fairbanks before he turned pro, and he was a little bit older by the time he got into the AHL stream. He was already 22, I believe. So we're not there yet with this player. We don't know what the ceiling is, but it's at his size, it better be a high ceiling, or he's going to hit his head on it.
That's an interesting comparison, Colton Parayko. Let me just see. Yeah. So he stepped into a slightly different kind of program. I think the Northeastern program is probably a little bit ahead of University of Alaska Fairbanks, though I can't be certain about that. But that's an interesting take, Bruce. Yeah, the size is the thing that really, to do all of the things that Kesselring does and to be as big as he is. That's why I have him rated as high as I do, because that's a pretty impressive thing. And those big defensemen, man, they can just be brutal on other teams, like in terms of getting around them, and if they get their games together defensively. And he's a very fundamentally sound, and he's a high compete level and a pretty gritty player defensively too. So Theodore Landstrom. I had him again the highest, and you had him, Bruce. You had him tied for lowest with Sean. He's just barely on our list as a prospect. He's 26, and he he is a prospect, I guess, because he's not played in the NHL. Although 26 years old, maybe it's a little unfair to even have him on the list. But we had him there because he's a new player to the Oilers, and I just see a player who is very, very fast, very, very smart, and competes hard. And I think is a much better player than Joel Persson, the hope from Sweden last year. They're not comparable. I don't think in any aspect of the game, maybe shooting the puck, Persson's better. But in every other aspect of the game, I rank Landstrom higher than Persson. And I think he's got a chance to make the Oilers as a seventh D-man. And listen, Chris Russell's 34, Bruce. He's not a great puck mover. If the Oilers, there's a real chance, I think, that Landstrom through this year could move ahead and become the third pairing D-man on the Oilers with injuries and would do just fine. Because I think he's a hell of a hockey player.
Yeah, he's an interesting candidate. I mean, again, he's a guy we made a little bit of an exception for. He is not eligible for the Calder Trophy this year, even though he hasn't played any NHL games, because he's slightly outside the threshold, the age threshold. He turned 26 in August, and it's based on guys that were under 26 on September 15th. So, but we decided to treat him as a prospect in terms of our scouting and reporting on the guy, because he's a new player to the Oilers, and he's a young player without just not quite young enough, and he'll just be on our list for just this 1 year. But he's what really stood out about him is his translatable skill is his skating, and that's top notch. I watched, we both watched him play earlier in the season, and we had a glowing report on an earlier podcast, as I recall. And I recently he missed a couple games with an injury, and then I watched the 3 games he played after he came back. And the first game back, he was just kind of getting through it. And the second game, he skated better. And the third game, he was back to doing what he was doing when we saw him originally, which was kind of all over the ice, always moving his feet, always jumping into holes, and making himself available as an offensive option. And the question to me is, how well will he withstand on the defensive side of the puck, playing against top-notch opponents that you find in the National Hockey League? So that's, if that's a problem, that's a big problem, and that'll be make or break. I think that's what ultimately broke Joel Persson as a candidate, was some of the heavy hockey, and he got run a few times, and unfortunately he got banged up twice in October, and that really set him back. And by the time he was healthy again, Ethan Bear had won the job.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, indeed. So, Kirill Maximov, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
We have him at number 13th. Sean had him as high as number 6th, and Maddie had him as low as number 25. You had
That's a difference of opinion.
There's the strongest. I think that's probably the biggest gap that we had on a player.
And I got him backwards. I got to fix that.
I had him at 11, and you had that reversed. Hopefully they have a sense of humor.
So too.
Kirill Maximov, I have him at 11. You have him at 13. Right where he is, Bruce. You nailed it. Probably you were the consensus picker. You nailed the consensus. Maybe because you picked last and you were looking at it. You were greatly influenced by everybody else. I'm just kidding.
Well, they weren't actually shuffled into the right order when I saw them, but at the end we shuffled them, and a lot of them were bang on for sure. Anyway,
so why do you have them at? Why did you have them? I want you to do a comparison, if you will, between Lavoie and Maximov, because they're two big power forwards who have a good shot and a gritty game. Why do you have Lavoie over Maximov?
Well, they do have a lot in common. Lavoie is a younger player. He's got higher draft pedigree. I think he has a somewhat better background as a scorer, and he is. On the sort of personal bias side, I saw more games of Lavoie playing than I did of Maximov, who is having trouble making his team. Mind you, his team that he's trying to make is in the KHL, which is several cuts above Hockey Allsvenskan. So again, it's an apples and oranges thing, which is what makes this whole process, frankly, a crapshoot. But they do have there's commonalities between them. for sure. Big guys that will take the puck to the net and love to shoot, and they've got some physicality to some edge to their games, and so it's the gap between them is probably not as wide as between 5 and 13 or whatever, but there's such a cluster of players in there. There's not a lot to choose that's where they wound up on my list, and really our list, I guess.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if their situations were reversed and Lavoie was trying out for Seska and Maximov was playing for Vasby, that if that we might have, like, our impression of them might be reversed, because they're very similar players in a lot of ways. Lavoie is a year younger, and is it a full year? We got the birth dates.
It's more than.
Yeah, he's more than a year younger. He's bigger.
We're drafted 2 years apart, right?
He's bigger, and I know Sean talks a lot about Maximov's shot, and if you watched OHL games, you would have seen that shot. I was looking for that shot in AHL games last year, and I didn't see Max. Like, he just didn't seem, he wasn't getting off his shot. He didn't have the ability at that level consistently to get off a shot. Like, he just wasn't, and that's why he didn't score much at the AHL last year. I saw him in one KHL game this year. I really liked how he played. I thought he played very well. He's a big, physical, aggressive player, and he's got a lot of game. He really competes hard. So I'm not negative about he killed penalties. I think he's. I agree. I think the gap between Lavoie and Maximov is exaggerated on our list, and these players are really kind of pick 'em at this point.
We likely have him low. I mean, he's played 10 games in the VHL, which is a pretty good comparison for Hockey Allsvenskan. In fact, it's probably higher. 10 games, 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points.
Yeah, I think we have him low.
He's I mean, don't take that 13 too close to heart. He's definitely a prospect. We're getting near the dividing point between prospects and other, but it's nice that we're in the teens before we get to that point,
rather than
being at number 3
3 or 4, like we would have in 1994 or 1995 or 1993. Like, the lists were pretty weak in those years, especially in retrospect.
2012 number 4 was Martin Gernat, and 2014 it was Bogdan Yakimov.
Ouch.
So
all right. Yeah, this is the thing. This is why I'm kind of excited about this list. Like, we're getting deeper. We have Cooper Maroti, who is at number 18. Cooper Maroti, like a year ago, was eating the AHL alive, like on the attack before he got hurt. He was flying around like he was the Patrick Kane of the AHL, which doesn't necessarily translate into anything in the NHL. But that's what he looked like at that level of play, which is a very high level of play, like Cooper Maroti, and he's now 18th on our list, Bruce. So the Oilers have a little bit of depth here.
Right.
Number 14 is Tyler Tulio, who I saw, and I don't think, and Sean's seen a lot, and Sean has him at 8.
Right.
So he's seen him the most, and he's really high on this player. And I only had him at 14, but there's lots of really good players, so it's no shame at being at number 14. Excuse me. He's a very, I put him in the Chris Versteeg class of NHL forwards. Smart, feisty, good with the puck, not very big, not a super fast skater. So could he have a Versteeg-like career? Yeah, he might. He could. He's got all those same qualities as a hockey player. And we'll see how it's his first year. They wasted 126th overall pick on the guy. Not very much at all. The investment isn't huge, but the payoff could be something. I think the Savoy and Tulio picks were outstanding picks, and I hope Sean's faith in this player has him number 8 is the actual talent level, because that would probably translate into a super solid AHL player, maybe an NHLer.
Yeah, he's got, I mean, here's a report that I saw from Mile High Hockey, which was before the draft, of the Colorado Avalanche SBN site. And I just got this one section, where he'll be drafted, and it says, much lower than he should. Tulio is going to fall into the late second round or even third, and it's going to look crazy in a few years. Like former Oshawa general and now Stanley Cup champion Anthony Cirelli, Tulio is going to drastically outplay his draft slot as he turns into a key contributor on whichever NHL team drafts him. Never projecting him second or third round as being ridiculously low, and the Oilers got him in the fifth round.
Here's the
now,
thing,
obviously,
though. Here's
that's
the
a
thing,
glowing.
Bruce.
Somebody saw him real good, but I mean, Anthony Cirelli. I mean, that's got my attention.
All these NHL scouts, though, they're not dummies. They are very dedicated, sharp hockey observers, and they all watched this guy. And it turns out they rated 125 players ahead of him in the draft. And they did that for a reason. Like, they're not trying to get it wrong. They're desperate to get it right. So there must be something about Tulio that maybe isn't apparent. Now, listen, he's not, and these are two obvious things, Bruce. He ain't that big and he's not that fast a skater. Okay? I think those are two pretty important things for an NHL hockey player. If you're a smaller guy, you better be able to be flying out there, generally speaking. And he doesn't. So that's, I think, why he dropped. I'm guessing why he dropped him. And that's why I'm comparing him to Christopher Stieg. Because Christopher Stieg was also a smaller guy who wasn't like super fast on his skates. I think he developed into at least an NHL average skater, but he got by on his smarts and his compete level. And so that's what I would see with Tulio in terms of projecting an NHL career. He's really high on those two things. But his skating has got to get better, and I don't think he's going to probably not get a whole lot bigger. But if his skating improves and he can keep up that work and not get injured, he's got a chance.
Yeah. Well, I actually found a place for him to play over in Slovakia.
Yeah,
he just showed up on a team over in Slovakia, which is unique in my entire lifetime experience of watching hockey, and not that. After 18 games into the regular season, they had -1 points in the standings. They were 0-16-2. They had 2 Bettman points, or whatever they call those, over in Slovakia. And the team had been punished 3 points for some kind of failed to show up, or I don't know what the heck it was. They got a 3-point penalty, and they've only earned 2 points the entire season. So they're listed in the standings as -1, and the team right ahead of them, had 19 points. And they had -1.
So they'd get whipped by Vasby then.
And he scored in his first. He was in his first game. He scored a goal, and so at least made a nice first impression at least, but. There's more teams over there than you or I could shake a stick at. I never heard of this team playing in the Slovakian league, and they're right out the bottom of the standings.
Well, it speaks to his dedication, and his dad's the owner of the Oshawa team. Maybe it speaks to his dad's determination as well to get him over there, place him over there on a team, and I don't know, like if the Oilers set that up or the family did, I don't know, but good work on setting that up. Like, that's a really good sign. It shows a hungry player. I like to see that. We'll end up with number 15 on our list, Bruce. We've already talked about it. Konovalov,
right,
is number 15, and he's played 7 or 8 games, I think, and he's done okay, but he's
lost his job.
Lost his job to the player that I've already forgotten his name, even though you looked it up there.
Eddie Pasquale. I didn't even look it up. It finally hit me. Eddie Pasquale was the guy that's got his job. Just let me find some numbers for you, because Konovalov, he's had he plays with Lokomotiv Yaroslavl in the KHL. He's played 10 games with a .924 goals against average. That sounds pretty good, right? And
yeah,
that's Anton Lander's team over there in the KHL. But Eddie Pasquale's played 23 games with a 1.66 goals against average and a .932 save percentage. And the team has been winning with Pasquale, and the coach has just been sticking with him. And I think the fact that Konovalov has not signed an extension has probably got the team looking for Plan B because they know he may well be headed for North America after the
Yeah.
season. But you would have thought as a backup he'd get the odd game. I think he played one game in the entire month of November and not since. So,
Right. So
mm,
there's a few players who have dropped big on the list. Philip Berglund went from 7 to 17.
mm-hmm,
Maroti 11 to 18.
mm-hmm,
Markus Niemelainen from 15 to 23rd.
mm-hmm,
And the thing these players have in common, I would suggest, is maybe injury. I
right.
don't know why Maroti just played the one game in Austria and then went home, but
Oh,
there's Niemelainen may have been banged up. His team was sidelined by COVID.
mm-hmm.
Berglund,
He missed. No,
Berglund,
he missed a month, almost a month.
oh, he did, and Berglund has been injured, and
He's out now.
yeah, so we may have got a misread
Well,
on
there's a couple
Philip Berglund.
things there. Sorry, a couple things there. The ratings that you gave were our interim ratings. Berglund
Yes,
was actually 20 last year, and he's 17 now. Niemelainen was 37 last year, and he's 23 now. But what happened in the springtime was that they signed a contract while nobody else was doing anything, and that kind of, I think, raised our expectation that the Oilers saw things in these guys
yeah,
and we probably bumped them a little higher than they should. And now, having watched them in games, I've bumped them back down again. So actually,
yeah,
both guys is rated higher than they were in our 2019 rankings, but significantly lower than we had in this. We gave them a big boost, and turned out that they deserved a smaller boost, at least based on current information now.
yeah. Alrighty. Well, the last thing I'll say about this list is Sean Patrick Ryan was speculating, just how good is this list? And he says, is this the best Oilers list in a long time? And since when? He was asking that question. And I'm asking the same question. How good is this list? Is this one of the best lists or the best list that we've had in a long time? And I think it is, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
I think more accurately, the group of prospects that we're going to see coming into the NHL already starting last year with Yamamoto, Bear, and Jones, and
Yep.
continuing on for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
I suspect is going to be the best group of players to enter into the NHL for the Oilers since the 1979 to about 83.
Wow.
And it's not necessarily saying a lot because
Well,
the Oilers had such a terrible draft record from about 1985, 1984 on. And
right.
then they got better again, interestingly. There's a period in about 1999 to 2001
Yeah.
where they got pretty good. And the 2000 group, just the 2000 group here's the group of players on that list. Matt Lombardi, who the Oilers didn't sign, but was drafted by the Oilers and went on to have a pretty good NHL career. Brad Winchester,
Mm-hmm.
longtime bottom line player in the NHL. Mike Comrie, who rose like a bullet in the NHL and then, leveled off pretty fast.
That hurt.
Sean Horkoff, who had an outstanding NHL career. Jason Chimera, who had an outstanding NHL career. Fernando Persani, who had an
Mm-hmm.
excellent, really strong NHL career, and Martin Ruchinsky, who had a pretty excellent, strong NHL career as well. Those
For
are
other
all
teams, too many of them, but
yeah, fair enough, man. Fair enough, Bruce.
decent, a decent group for sure. Yeah, I would compare this group more to that. I don't think it's. We need to go back to 1980, uh, which had more, very very high end players. Uh, my interpretation of this group is that it's deeper than anything we've seen in, the 10 years we've been doing this. I would say this is, if you go down to number 10, number 12, number 15 and compare them to previous years, that they're better off. What it doesn't have is quite the high end talent. Like I would say, of the years we did, in 2014, we had a top three that was Draisaitl, Nurse, and Clefbaum. 2015, we had a top two that was McDavid and Nurse. And there's just nobody in this group. I don't think. I mean, Philip Brolberg, please prove me wrong, but I don't see any McDavids or Drysaitls in there. And I mean, Broberry and Bouchard, well, maybe they're as good as Nurse and Clefbaum, who were on the list together for a couple of years, but you just don't have the super high end forward to go with them. So depends if you're looking for peak value or if you're looking for breadth of value. So I would say good for depth, but the high end isn't quite there. That we've seen a couple times that when the Oilers had very high draft picks.
So I guess the question, the question that properly framed would be: is this the deepest list of Oiler prospects maybe that we've ever seen? The early years, of course, are handicapped because the Oilers only had six draft picks in 1979. And, 3 of them turned out to be Mark Messier, Kevin Lowe, and Glenn Anderson. But they only had 6 players on their list, plus a few other, free agent signings. I guess maybe Charlie Huddy. Yeah. When does Charlie Huddy enter their list? They'll have to.
1979. He was signed right after that. There was only 126 players picked in that 79 draft, and some of them were coming out of the WHA. And there was also the case that was a double eligibility draft because they lowered the age limit from 20 to 19. The following year, they lowered it again to 18. So both of those drafts had sort of 2 full classes of players, and only 126 players chosen in 1979. There was a lot of quality that slipped right through that 79 draft.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Charlie Huddy. So the 1980 list has already graduated Mark Messier and Kevin Lowe, and the 1980 list has Charlie Huddy, Paul Coffey, Yeri Curry, Andy Moog, Walt Podubny, and Glenn Anderson. So that's the best list, I think, 1980. Especially when you include Huddy. I mean, there's Huddy, Messier, Lowe, and Anderson. Those 2 lists will compete with each other as the best lists, without any doubt about that. But in terms of depth, we'll see. The 2000 list is again pretty impressive. Those are all guys who played, I think, more than 500 NHL hockey games. So the 2000 list. So I think that's the best, like in terms of depth, that's what we're looking at here. And pretty good, pretty impressive. And I think the 2019 list would be have the most depth because, again, it's going to have almost all of these players that are on this year's list, except for Holloway, Lavoie, and Tulio. But you have Yamamoto, Bear Jones, and John Marino in his last year on the Oilers list. Sadly, I think he was on the list, was he not, Bruce?
Yeah, he was. He certainly was.
And looking like he wasn't going to come here, but that's going to be a pretty good list of 2019 because it's got Bouchard and Brolberg as well. So we'll see about that one.
Here's another name for you, David, that wasn't drafted in 1979 who was eligible. Tim Kerr. Philadelphia Flyers, who within 4 years, he would go on to consecutive seasons of 54, 54, 58, 58, and 48 goals.
Where are you getting, did you just pop in your head, Tim Kerr? Out of your head.
Yeah, he was sort of the famous example of a guy who slipped through the 79 draft. I mean, to me, it's Charlie Huddy, and to you, it's Charlie Huddy, but he was, why would anybody be interested in a 6'3", 230-pound scoring winger? But such was the nature of that draft. It was so compressed, and with all the expansion going on and everything, there were some real gems that fell through the cracks there. Pretty big crack that let Tim Kerr fall through it. Wow.
Yeah, his career was cut short.
Huge, yes.
By injury.
Yeah,
as
unfortunately.
So often the case with hockey players. It's a tough game. Alrighty, Bruce. Well, I'm going to be writing about this issue of the draft depth. I'm going to look into it, actually. So that's going to be my next post because I was spurred on by a criticism. Someone said, why are you speculating about this? Like, this, how can you say this? And so I said,
CalgaryPuck.com, eh?
Yeah. And so it's a fair comment, fair question. And I like, that's the good thing about Twitter. You get challenged and it thinks, you dig into stuff then. And you have to try to think about it. But I do think that this is a very deep group this year and last year's. And this overall group of players taken by a number of different scouting teams in the last 5 years for the Oilers is putting this team, it's kind of exciting, Bruce, because I don't think we haven't seen this kind of depth in a long time. Alrighty.
Certainly good to add, they've got the key pieces already in place and, filling out the depth. And this has been my point for years is that the Oilers haven't built enough sort of internal pieces of, third and fourth line players and, grinders and role players. They keep going outside the organization for them. And really that's the pieces you got to find from inside. You got to draft Anthony Cirelli and put him through your minor league team and bring him up and find a role for him, even if it's, he's not necessarily the sexy player that went in the top 5 of the draft or whatever. You got to find those other guys, and that's been a consistent failure for the Oilers for all the years we've been doing the cult of hockey, really. And it takes time to turn around. As you say, it really started to change in 2015, but it took till 2020 before some of these guys actually finally, broke through the surface into the NHL level. And hopefully they're the vanguard of a whole new movement.
It's interesting. The 3 draft years that I'm looking at focused on 1980, 2000, 2020. So it seems to be a 20-year cycle. So hopefully that'll be the case.
Conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter. They happen every 20 years, and they happen in those exact same 3 years. So 80, 20, 1000, and 2020.
The conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter?
Yep. 2 big planets. They're visible right now in the southwest right after sunset on a clear day, which this isn't.
What does that mean, the conjunction of them?
They're just one's passing the other in the sky because they're going around the sun at different rates.
So from our perspective, from Earth's perspective?
Jupiter overtakes Saturn every 20 years, and it's just in the process now of making an exceedingly close pass. So a matter of, it's gotten quite a bit of coverage in the press and of particular interest to nerds like me.
The Saturn, so we got it's the Saturn to Jupiter draft list. That's the kind of quality information you get on this podcast. You will get on no other podcast.
Probably not.
Podcast. Thanks for
listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.